Elena had always believed love was a myth, something people talked about in books and movies, but never truly experienced. At 32, she had resigned herself to a quiet life, running a small bookstore in a sleepy coastal town. That was until he walked in. It was a rainy Tuesday when Daniel Hale stumbled into the last chapter, soaked from head to toe, clutching a waterlogged copy of Pride and Prejudice. "Sorry," he muttered, shaking droplets onto the wooden floor. "I was caught in the storm." Elena handed him a towel without a word. He had the kind of face that belonged in old photographs, sharp jawline, dark eyes, a faint scar above his brow. The kind of face that made her heart do stupid things. "You're the third person this week looking for shelter from the rain," she said dryly. Daniel grinned. "Then I guess fate has a thing for bookstores." He didn't leave after the storm passed. Instead, he lingered, pulling books off the shelves, asking her opinions, laughing at her dry humor. He told her he was a writer, traveling the country for inspiration. Elena didn't believe in love at first sight, but she did believe in curiosity, and she was curious about him. Days turned into weeks. Daniel became a fixture in the shop, reading in the corner, scribbling in his notebook, stealing glances when he thought she wasn't looking. One evening, as they sat on the floor surrounded by piles of books, he turned to her. "Elena," he said softly, "what if I told you I didn't come here by accident?" She froze. "What do you mean?" He pulled out a worn photograph from his wallet, a younger version of herself, standing in front of a different bookstore, in a different life. "I read an article about you years ago. A woman who gave up her corporate job to chase her dream. I wanted to meet you ever since." Elena's breath caught. "You stalked me?" Daniel laughed. "No, I just waited for the right time to find you." And just like that, Elena realized love wasn't a myth. It was a story, one you had to be brave enough to let unfold. She leaned forward. "Then I guess you'd better start writing our next chapter." Months passed, and Daniel became as much a part of the last chapter as the books themselves. He wrote in the mornings, his brow furrowed in concentration, while Elena brewed coffee and pretended not to watch him. In the afternoons, they bickered over shelving systems, alphabetical by author or by mood. Elena insisted mood was ridiculous. Daniel argued that sometimes a reader needed melancholy more than Murakami. But then, just as the autumn leaves began to blush red, Daniel received a letter. Elena found him at the back of the shop, his usual easy smile replaced by something tense. "What's wrong?" she asked. He handed her the envelope. It was from a literary agent in New York, an offer for his novel. With one condition, he had to be there in person to finalize the deal. Indefinitely. Elena's chest tightened, but she forced a smile. "This is what you wanted, isn't it?" Daniel hesitated. "I didn't expect it to happen like this." That night, they sat on the bookstore's rooftop, wrapped in a shared blanket, the stars flickering above them. "You should go," Elena said finally, her voice steady. "A story like yours deserves to be told." Daniel turned to her, his eyes searching. "What if I don't want to go without you?" Elena laughed, but it came out brittle. "And do what? Drag me to New York? You know this shop is my life." "It was your life," he corrected gently. "But life changes. People change." She looked away, blinking hard. The truth was, she had changed. The woman who once believed love was a myth now feared it was real and that it might leave. 1 year later, the last chapter was quieter without Daniel. Elena told herself it was fine. She had her books, her routines, the familiar creak of the floorboards. But every time the bell above the door chimed, her heart leapt foolishly. Then, on the first day of spring, a package arrived. Inside was a novel, The Library of Second Chances, with Daniel's name on the cover. Tucked between the pages was a bookmark with a handwritten note. "Every story has an ending, but the best ones, they get sequels. D." Elena's hands trembled. She was still staring at the words when the doorbell rang. And there he was, windblown, slightly older, but with the same crooked grin. "So," Daniel said, "I was thinking mood-based shelving might actually work if..." Elena didn't let him finish. She crossed the distance between them in 3 strides and kissed him, the novel still clutched in her hand. Years had a way of folding into each other like well-loved pages. Daniel stayed, not just for a season, but for everyone that followed. He wrote his second novel in the back corner of the last chapter, where the afternoon light spilled gold over his notes. Elena still scolded him for dog-earing pages, though she secretly adored the way he'd scribble margin notes just for her. "This line made me think of you," or "we should argue about this later." The shop thrummed. Word spread about the tiny bookstore with the moody shelving system, a compromise. Alphabetical, but with emotional ambience stickers. Tourists and locals alike came for the romance section curated by Daniel, who insisted on hand-selling Jane Eyre to every skeptic with a wink. "Trust me, it's hotter than it sounds." One evening, as they closed up, Elena found a first edition of Pride and Prejudice, hidden under the counter, the same waterlogged copy Daniel had carried in years ago, now carefully restored. Tucked inside was a ring. "You once told me love was a myth," Daniel said, kneeling on the creaky floorboards. "Prove me wrong." Elena pulled him up by his collar. "Took you long enough," she muttered against his lips. They married in the shop, beneath strings of fairy lights and a banner that read, "Happily Ever After, subject to editing." The guests sat on stacked hardcovers. The aisle was lined with their favorite novels. And when their daughter was born, a fierce little thing with Elena's scowl and Daniel's penchant for drama, her first lullaby was the rustle of turning pages, because love wasn't a myth. It was just a story, and they were still writing it.